What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. When you think of the United States and Canada, you probably picture friendly neighbors, the world's longest undefended border, and maybe a shared love for hockey. But what if I told you that once upon a time, these two nations were locked in a fierce, bloody conflict? A war that many people have completely forgotten about. Today, we're diving deep into the incredible story of the War of 1812. The forgotten war where the US and Canada fought each other. It all kicks off in, you guessed it, 1812. The world was a chaotic place. Napoleon was marching across Europe, and Great Britain was locked in a desperate struggle with France. To cripple the French war machine, the British Royal Navy started blockading ports and, in the process, began stopping American ships. They were looking for British deserters, but they weren't too picky. They started forcibly drafting American sailors into the Royal Navy, a practice known as impressment. As you can imagine, this did not go over well back in Washington. Tensions were already high due to British support for Native American tribes resisting American expansion in the Northwest Territory. For a group of American politicians known as the War Hawks, this was the last straw. They saw a chance to defend American honor, push the British out of North America for good, and maybe, just maybe, annex Canada while they were at it. On June 18, 1812, President James Madison signed the Declaration of War, and the stage was set. The American plan seemed simple enough: invade and capture the British colonies in North America, which would later become Canada. They figured the colonists, many of whom were former Americans, would welcome them as liberators. They were wrong. The initial American invasion was a disaster. General William Hull led an army from Detroit into Upper Canada, but he was timid and easily bluffed. A much smaller force of British regulars, Canadian militia, and their Native American allies, led by the brilliant British General Isaac Brock and the legendary Shawnee chief Tecumseh, used clever tactics and psychological warfare to trick Hull into thinking he was vastly outnumbered. Terrified, Hull retreated back to Detroit and, in a humiliating turn of events, surrendered the entire fort and his army without a single major battle. It was a catastrophic start for the Americans and a massive morale boost for the Canadian defenders. Meanwhile, other invasion attempts along the Niagara frontier also sputtered. At the Battle of Queenston Heights, American troops managed to gain a foothold on the Canadian side, but the New York militia refused to cross the border to reinforce them, arguing their service didn't require them to fight on foreign soil. The British, led by General Brock, counterattacked. Though Brock tragically lost his life in the battle, his forces rallied and crushed the American invasion. The victory at Queenston Heights became a foundational story for Canadian identity, a symbol of a diverse group of people, British, Canadian, and First Nations, uniting to defend their homes. The dream of a quick and easy conquest of Canada was quickly turning into an American nightmare. While the land war was off to a rocky start for the U.S., things were different at sea. The fledgling U.S. Navy, though tiny compared to the mighty Royal Navy, was filled with well-built ships and skilled, motivated sailors. In a series of stunning single-ship duels, American frigates like the USS Constitution earned a fearsome reputation. The Constitution's famous victory over HMS Guerriere earned it the nickname Old Ironsides, because British cannonballs seemed to just bounce off its thick oak hull. These naval victories were a huge source of pride for the American public, and proved that the United States could stand up to the world's greatest naval power, at least on a small scale. On the Great Lakes, a critical battleground for controlling supply lines, another naval hero emerged. In 1813, Oliver Hazard Perry built a small fleet from scratch on the shores of Lake Erie. In a desperate battle, he defeated the British squadron and sent his famous message, "We have met the enemy, and they are ours." This victory gave the U.S. control of Lake Erie, forcing the British and their allies to abandon Detroit and retreat back into Canada. Following Perry's victory on Lake Erie, the Americans pursued the retreating British and Native American forces. This led to the Battle of the Thames in October 1813. Here, the American Army, led by William Henry Harrison, yes, the future president, won a decisive victory. The battle is most famous for the death of the great Shawnee leader, Tecumseh. Tecumseh had envisioned a grand confederacy of Native American nations to halt American expansion. His death shattered that dream. Without his leadership, the alliance fell apart, and British influence in the region was severely weakened. While a major strategic win for the Americans, it marked a tragic turning point for the indigenous peoples of the Great Lakes region. By 1814, the war in Europe had changed. Napoleon was defeated, and Britain could finally turn its full attention to the conflict in America. They sent thousands of veteran troops across the Atlantic, planning a three-pronged attack to bring the U.S. to its knees. One of these prongs targeted the heart of the American government itself, Washington, D.C. In August 1814, British forces landed in Maryland, easily swept aside the disorganized American militia at the Battle of Bladensburg, and marched unopposed into the capital. In retaliation for the American burning of York, modern-day Toronto, a year earlier, the British set fire to the city's public buildings. The White House, the Capitol building, and the Library of Congress all went up in flames. President Madison and his government were forced to flee in a moment of profound national humiliation. First Lady Dolly Madison famously stayed behind until the last possible moment to save a priceless portrait of George Washington, securing her place as a national hero. After burning Washington, the British turned their sights on their next target, the strategically important port city of Baltimore. But Baltimore was ready. The city was heavily fortified, especially Fort McHenry, which guarded the entrance to the harbor. For 25 long hours, British warships bombarded the fort with rockets, mortars, and cannons. A young American lawyer named Francis Scott Key was detained on a British ship, watching the terrifying spectacle unfold through the night. He had no idea if the fort would survive. But when the sun rose on the morning of September 14th, he saw the massive American flag still flying defiantly over the fort's walls. He was so moved by the sight that he penned a poem he called The Defense of Fort McHenry. That poem was later set to music, and today we know it as the Star-Spangled Banner, the national anthem of the United States. The successful defense of Baltimore halted the British advance and provided a much-needed morale boost for the entire nation. By late 1814, both sides were exhausted. The war was expensive, disruptive, and had largely become a stalemate. Diplomats met in Ghent, in what is now Belgium, to hammer out a peace treaty. On Christmas Eve 1814, they signed the Treaty of Ghent. The incredible thing about this treaty? It essentially just ended the fighting and returned everything to the way it was before the war. No territory changed hands. The treaty didn't even mention the issues of impressment or trade rights that had started the war in the first place. It was, in essence, a draw. But news traveled slowly back then. In fact, the biggest and most one-sided battle of the entire war was fought 2 weeks after. The peace treaty was signed. In January 1815, a massive British force attacked New Orleans. There, a motley American army under the command of General Andrew Jackson, composed of Army regulars, militia, pirates, and free men of color, built incredible defenses and won a stunning, lopsided victory. The battle made Andrew Jackson a national superstar and created a powerful, though mistaken sense that America had won the war. So who actually won the War of 1812? It's a question historians still debate, and the answer really depends on who you ask. From an American perspective, even though they didn't achieve their initial goal of conquering Canada, the war fostered a powerful new sense of national identity and unity. They had stood up to the British Empire for a second time and survived. This period is often called the era of good feelings. For Canada, the war was a defining moment. They successfully repelled the American invasions, which helped create a distinct Canadian identity separate from the United States and solidified their loyalty to the British Crown. The war created heroes and myths that are central to Canada's story. Perhaps the clearest losers were the Native American tribes. The war broke their alliance with the British and shattered their hopes of halting American expansion. The end of the war opened the floodgates for settlers to move west. The War of 1812 may be forgotten by many, but its legacy is all around us. It shaped the border, forged national identities, and set the United States and Canada on a path, not as enemies, but as the firm friends and allies we know today. What an incredible story, right? A war that ended in a draw, but had profound consequences for everyone involved. What do you think is the most fascinating part of this forgotten conflict? Let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into history, please give this video a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.